Hello, Deborah Neal Baker here with our serious business conversation. And I wanted to share that we really are requesting that you join us, that you enroll in our YouTube channel, so that if you like this, we subscribe to our YouTube channel, and that way you can see everything that we've done. We started doing these conversations before serious business and decided that they were very beneficial and worthwhile. So here we go. And today, our guest today is really kind of a unique person in our industry, because he's a CPA, and he's a creative, and he has been committed to the beauty industry and growing salons for as long as I've known him, and that's probably been 35 years. So with great pleasure, let's bring Tom Kuhn on with me. Hey, Tom.
Hi, Deborah. Thanks for having me. How are you?
I'm well. It's always a pleasure. And, as I said, you're kind of a unique person in our industry. And I just want to get right into it, because you have this unique position too in the industry, where you work so intimately with so many salons and have for so many years, that you have a lot of data. And it really, and that data, I would love to hear, for instance, so here we're kind of coming out of the pandemic that we've been in for over a year. So during the pandemic, what data surprised you the most as you continued to work with salons during this last year?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and I'm actually going to start out with what didn't surprise me. One of the things that we knew from 2008 and previous downturns in the economy is that transactions go down, traffic goes down, but average ticket goes up. So I think something that surprised a lot of people didn't necessarily surprise me, not that I'm any genius here, but it didn't surprise me that average ticket went through the roof, but it certainly surprised a lot of salon owners. I would say that something that definitely surprised me is the impact on profitability, which has been much more favorable than I ever imagined. And many people took care of, used the pandemic as a silver lining to really shore up their P&L and their expense model. And so I'm seeing profitability certainly helped by government aid, but I've been really surprised with how healthy salons are right now, many of them, and then also how strong their balance sheet is and the amount of cash that they have. There's just a lot of liquidity right now. I mean, I'm looking at balance sheets for many of our clients, and I'm saying, holy cow, you have a lot of cash. So anyway, those are just some things right up.
So I've got a real question on that. So what are they doing with their cash?
Well,
or what are they going to do with their cash?
So that's a good question. And what some are doing is they're using that for investment capital. We're finding that several are taking advantage of preferred finance with SBA and buying buildings. It's actually helped move along some transitions that needed to take place. For example, I'm working with a 3-location owner, and she's been wanting to sell her business for a while, but didn't have strong enough liquidity and wasn't going to be able to get enough out of the business from a key employee she was sending to. But she has a tremendous amount of cash in the bank, and she's also able to take distributions out of that cash tax-free before she sells the business, so she doesn't need as high a price as she once thought she needed. So that's a big surprise.
Wow.
And I'm seeing that happen repeatedly.
So yeah, a few years ago, I remember we talked about, we had a lot of people that were, transitioning or put it this way, they wanted to transition, but they weren't quite sure how to do it. So you've really also become kind of the expert in our industry on what you call transitioning. So how many transitions have you seen happening over the last, year?
So the pandemic's been an accelerator for many things. It's also accelerated people thinking through what they want to do with the rest of their life. So many people that were sitting on the fence, that were thinking about starting the process of getting their business ready for sale, started to move along because everything just seemed so much more imminent. To answer your question, right now, I mean, I'm running two companies and I'm also working with a group of clients to help them decide whether to grow or go. And right now, there's about an active 25 clients that
Wow.
at some stage in the process. And the exciting thing is transition. The terminology we use right now is it's a very simple question. Are you going to grow or go? And you can't sit on the fence. In certain cases, people want to grow and then go. In certain cases, they want to go now. So it's a lot, and it's all different stages of the transition process, and it's super exciting because it allows for the legacy of the salon to continue on. Because in all the work I'm doing, they're not closing their business. What's happening is they're bringing in new blood, some new vitality. It's like a renaissance also for the salon to bring in some fresh ownership. In many cases, the salon will plateau because the owner's bored, burned out, or just ready to get out. And now you got this exciting generation that just
Yeah,
wants to step up and move it along.
I agree. I mean, even in our own company, it was already happening and it definitely got accelerated during the pandemic when I think about like doing virtual serious business. I mean, that was our younger generation behind Edwin and I that have been really working on that. And boy, I mean, I don't know, but I was very pleased with the result of that. So yeah, I think that's happening probably in lots of businesses and companies. Um, in fact, you used the term a while ago when we were talking about you see that there's this professional renaissance or kind of a rebirth going on. So, talk to us a little bit more about that.
I'm going to start with my own company because that's where I feel it the most. And then I can extend it to other businesses. There's just been my thinking and my thoughts and my feelings, like everybody else over the last year, has just gone through so many different stages. And I woke up today thinking, Renaissance is a word that I really need to start using because there's just been so many births and rebirths. The number of new relationships that I've established in the last year, in spite of not even being face to face with people, some new people I've heard of in the industry but never met them before. It's just been an explosion of new relationships. That's one thing. The other thing is we've rebirthed our brand. Qnity really started out being very much about money related success, and we wanted to make sure that we also help people do what they love and have a quality of life. And it started to get watered down. Well, we realized that, what, really where we feel we have the greatest confidence and make the biggest difference is on the money part of the business. So that's a little bit of a rebirth, going back to our roots. We've also have new markets, new partnerships, and a new company. But at the same time, it's also a rebirth in relationships. For example, the relationship that we've had for 25 years. By the way, I'm not a CPA anymore. I should make sure that we go public
Well,
on
but
that.
once a CPA, probably always a CPA, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So I think that Renaissance feels like the right word to me right now. And I think that there's an explosion of innovation. I'm seeing growth happen all over the country. And of course, there's still fear all over the place, but I'm an unapologetic optimist to begin with. So
Sometimes honestly, the whole fear thing, I mean, fear like stress does have some benefit. And the benefit is that it puts you into action, right? Or it should. Um, but so when you talk about innovation, you're seeing all this innovation. What are some of the innovations that you're seeing in our industry?
well, I have my answer to that question. I'm going to give you an indirect answer to that question. Uh, One of the things that I started doing almost a year ago as a way to try to contribute almost as an act of public service was to create a forum for a weekly financial roundtable. It started mid-May last year. And we created what's called a brain trust. And we've had just amazing people to be part of these roundtables. 41 weeks we've done. We've only missed 5 weeks. We were only going to do 5 weeks. And we just keep going. We keep going, keep going. It's Wednesday at 10 a.m. During those sessions is where we see and feel the innovation. It's where a lot of the, so I'm more the curator in terms of pulling out of people. Certainly we see it in the area of retail, take-home kits, using technology more. Certainly as it relates to expanding beyond brick and mortar. We did a session a couple weeks ago with, Sam Bricata's on. He always comes up with great ideas. Robert Cromians was on 2 weeks ago, and he was talking about all these different things, So it's just really fun to see what some of the best minds in the industry are doing right now.
And it makes me wonder, we've always used the term best practice. And, it sounds to me like, because I'm listening too. I'm listening more than curating like you are. But it certainly sounds like we are, I don't know what the best practices are at this point. I mean, there must be, because people are experimenting. They're doing things that they never thought they were going to do. And they've had to a lot of us have changed our perspective, which then changes our actions, right?
You mentioned data, and I know that's something that you wanted me to speak to. And yes, I've been very lucky that I was entrusted by several multi-location companies, some of the best in the business, including Paris Parker, really strong multi-location brands that put trust into me to share their P&Ls over a period of years so that we could really look at actual P&Ls and completely understand, for example, in the multi-location model, what are benchmarks, what are best practices, how do you correlate certain behaviors to profitability? That's one of the things that Edwin loved the most about 2 to 10. Taking it to the present, this is really timely, Deborah, to actually be speaking about this, because one of the things that we're going to do is we are going to reenact a study that we did. It was either 6 or 7 years ago. And it was a part of the 2 to 10 project where we did surveys affecting what we call 5 key functions of the business: marketing, education, operations, finance, and human capital. So what's going to be really cool is that we will do this survey and we will find out answers to questions today in each of those functions and compare them to answers from what we saw in a previous business model to really bring light to how the industry is changing. So we'll be starting that study this summer, and we will release the findings at the 2 to 10 project in Chicago on October 4th and 5th. So that's going to be really revealing.
Do you anticipate a lot of change from the data that you're going to collect to the data that was collected years ago?
I do. I think there's going to be changes in each one of those functions. Certainly finance is an area people to look to me for. And yes, there's definitely going to be changes in the finance function. There's going to be changes as it relates to costs, such as PPE and other things that are pandemic related. And I do expect a lot of changes. Marketing's completely changed. Operations and technology has really changed the nature of the business. So it would be really great to see it more in black and white and to start to see trends and see what that looks like in terms of being able to make decisions for your future business model. So I'm excited about it.
Yeah, I can tell. And that is exciting. Yeah, I mean, all this data is really, you mentioned about new relationships and, so what have you seen, because right now the consumer, the salon customer also has an opportunity to make some changes. So, I'm really, what I'm alluding to is like the customers that are staying with the salon, or maybe a lot of customers that are going to other salons, which means there's new customers that salons could attract. So I don't know, give me some insight around this subject about retaining or expanding your client reach.
Yeah, I felt that early on during the pandemic that many salons were so focused on their staff, as they should be, making them feel safe, secure, staying in touch with them, and but in many cases they were slow to the game as it related with clients. And so one of the guests that we had on the roundtable was actually someone that spoke at a previous 2 to 10 conference. He owns a series of fitness studios. And this is a fitness studio that I go to. In fact, my son, Relentless Ryan, works there. I'm working out with him this afternoon. And one of the things that this fitness studio owner, he's got 5 locations here in the Twin Cities, he sends me a personal video thanking me for the business. He probably sat down and just spent 2 hours doing video after video after video after video. Talk about building goodwill, that was powerful. And so I saw that many salons that were on that call started to say, "Whoa, we've got to stay more connected with our customers too, and let them know we value them." Because in certain cases, there's been an explosion of new clients in salons, and a lot of it has to do with salons keeping their eye off the ball.
Yeah, yeah, I've heard that too. It's it gives people, because I think that sometimes the hairdressers, we forget that the one of the things that retains a client is that they're uncomfortable leaving because they've
Right.
got this long relationship. So this last year's presented a situation where if somebody was thinking about, I'd like to try somewhere else, this would be the time they would do it. Yeah. So,
Yeah, and in terms of attrition has really varied by business, staff attrition. And I know of some brands, I know of one in particular that you know very well, they lost 42% of their staff. And this is a large business. And we're talking of 80 people leaving. And then there's other businesses where they had no one leave,
so okay,
no attrition.
let's talk about each one of those. So the salon that had 40 people leave, what, from your observation and analysis of this situation, what happened?
I think it was a combination of a few different things. This is a very well-run company, great people, very heart-centered, head and heart into the business. And I would break it down into a couple areas. Number one is members of the team not entirely buying into some of the safety protocol and hearing from some of their peers that are not working in employment-based salons that they're doing whatever they want to do. So just not agreeing with safety protocol, which is a shame. All right.
Very much so.
And then I also believe that in all of everything that goes into getting the PPP done and everything that goes into just keeping the business open and taking care of things, that not necessarily being as connected from a heart standpoint from members of the team, which is hard with a high headcount company like that. So now the good news is I was talking to them a couple days ago, and they went from being down 40%. They're now only down 15%, and they're trending right back up to where they were. So the recovery was much quicker than I could have imagined. So
Yeah, that tends to happen. I notice we always, when I say we as salon owners, sometimes we hang on to, these high producers, and we're afraid. But then when they're gone, it's amazing what opens up. Yeah.
yeah, I just had this conversation with someone yesterday that wants to bring in a new member of the family through marriage and wants to become a partner in this business. But there is a key producer who rules the roost, who still has some ownership, and it completely drags down everything in the business because you can't go forward because of this one individual. And certainly the revenue is great, but I think a renaissance would happen when this person departs. The skies will clear up in the sense that there's this, well, there is a cloud now. I mean, this person always needs to be happy, and no policies will go through unless this person is happy. And it's just not healthy. So,
Yes, yeah, yes. And so then the salons that were able to retain the majority of their staff and they just kept, so what was the, why is that? What
constant
happens?
communication. Yeah,
Constant
constant
communication.
communication, making sure that they address their emotional needs, um, making sure that they felt appreciated. And I don't know that I can nail it much more than that, you
Hmm.
know. And
But
you know,
you did
some of
make a
it,
point. You did make a point about the multi-location salons and that you really have to, I always think of our friend Van, and he grew his, he opened up new salons, but he did it very gradually and very
yeah,
methodically, and which ensured that the culture was, so, but I think multi-salon locations, it can be a little bit more challenging than just the one salon that you can, you know, really touch and feel and communicate with people yourself as a salon owner. And we're not, so we are not hairdressers. We're a non-hairdresser owned salon, and it's so critical for this hairdresser leadership in the salon space, I think. Whether
yeah,
it's, and it doesn't have to be the salon owner, but you have to have hairdresser leadership. So,
yeah, I agree. Yeah.
so say more about these weekly financial, this brain trust that you created.
So my reaction at the beginning of the pandemic was to do something. And the initial thing I did was like 22 YouTube videos. And it was right out of the chutes. It started like May 15th, and I just went wild with YouTube videos. And a lot of it was just to try to, calm people down and to also give them information, which at the time was very time sensitive from the government, just different government. And I think actually that government relief and the amount of government relief that came out because people were on it early saved a lot of businesses. So after doing these YouTube videos, it's not necessarily my jam to do a bunch of YouTube videos. I'm much more like you. I like conversations. And so just decided that we were going to, at 10 o'clock on Wednesday, just invite clients and friends and show up and just talk about the issues and the opportunities. Probably started out just like 2 to 10 did with 14 people. And at that time, there were so many different weekly Zoom meetings. It was just like one more thing. Well, it really just started to grow. And we invited people to be part of what's called a brain trust. And to be a brain trust means basically you're a trusted resource, and we want your brain because it's all hands on deck. These were some of the most critical financial decisions that needed to be made at the time, and I felt there was a high sense of urgency. So we'd have different guests. Van was on twice. I've had so many guests I can't even keep track of from globally. We've actually had some people from overseas, other industries. And so it ends up being, I'll go through just different things that's going on in the news as it relates to finances and salons. And then we'll just talk about different things. And a lot of things that came out was silver linings, changes that companies made that they've been putting off. iLove, for example, they came on and they talked about silver linings, things they wanted to get to, but they hadn't. For example, I think it was a price increase, a cancellation policy, and something with staff compensation. And so what it really did was, more than anything else, Deborah, it established a sense of community, a place where people could come together once a week, really speak very openly about finance as it related to like real estate, PPP, your staff. And so every Wednesday, here I am sitting in this very desk. And now what we're doing starting in 3 weeks is we're going to do a financial roundtable for school owners
Oh,
because
cool.
schools are
Right.
part of the ecosystem and they're also small businesses too. So,
That's awesome. So, well, you mentioned community, and there's definitely courage in numbers, right? So when you have and that's one of the things that's always been kind of missing. And we go in and out of it in our industry. The whole community, but you know, this pandemic really, I think it has accelerated and deepened community in every area of life. I mean, we're all very clear that we are in this together, So what are some of the, because you mentioned a few, but what are some of the biggest changes that you have seen salons? Because you mentioned, whether it's the price increase or the cancellation policy. What are some of the other big changes that we've maybe talked about and never implemented?
well, some other changes that we've seen has related with pricing, showing up pricing. We're now on our second large scale compensation project. We've already completed one with Gadabout, and that was a ton of fun. I mean, they had never really looked at their compensation in many, many years. And so they had some very clear goals. They wanted to eliminate what they call an operational charge, which is also known as a service charge. And we had to figure out how to fund it, and we had to figure out all of that. So compensation has been an area. We're working on another project right now related with compensation. So it's like things that weren't on the table before become on the table. Let me give you another example of something that we've seen, and that is people making decisions if they're multi-location. In many cases, there was a company that had one of the locations that was either a dog or their real estate. It was an unfavorable lease. And so we've seen some consolidation, and it hasn't resulted in lack of growth. It has meant one less location. And then we've also seen things like acquisitions. So it's definitely been a catalyst for movement in some very important parts of the business. Other things is the whole real estate topic has come up between landlords and tenants, which before the end of a lease. Normally, the only time you talk to your landlord is at the beginning or the end of a lease, or if there's some
It's almost been taboo to even think about or talk about the possibility of talking, about your lease with your landlord until
right.
it's so. Yeah, talk more about real estate and leases.
I've seen some extremes. I've seen some extremely generous landlords. There's one down in your state, one of your customers actually. Landlord made a voluntary reduction, significant in the real estate, and is allowing it to be a permanent reduction. I mean, I was shocked when I saw this, and it's actually in writing. And then I've seen the other extreme where landlords have just been ridiculous. Example, this is one here in the Twin Cities. Single location, small salon owner. I was helping her out really more as a favor, and it was very difficult for her to own and operate this business. And a big piece of it was her lease. And personally knew the landlord, cut the hair of the landlord's wife, okay? And she wanted to bring someone else to discuss the lease with the landlord. And his remark was, if you bring anybody else to the table, you'll get your eviction notice at the same time. There has been some very, very hardline landlords. So I have seen extremes as it relates to leases, for sure.
Wow, it sounds like fear could be driving both of those.
Yes,
Yes.
good point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, wow, and the consolidation, yes. Back to real estate, because I'm thinking about this. So, for years it was location, location, location.
Mm-hmm.
Is that mantra like kind of less important now?
I don't know. I don't know, but something else triggered to me that I think is something that has come up a lot during the roundtable. So I'm gonna stay with
Okay.
real estate and share with you something that I think is important. There was an era of very large salons, and salons that, 6,000, 7,000, 8,000, 10,000 feet. And that era has changed. The era of the large, not to say that there wasn't a trend moving away from them before the pandemic, but no one wants to buy a very large salon. And you've seen some closures, such as Jean Morez in Seattle, massive salons just closed down, open space. So the move away from really large footprints is definitely something we've seen. So, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, well, I we have at least one of those in Paris Parker for sure. Um, so let's see, what else do I'm just, you've got so much information. Um, so right now for our viewing audience, what is, if you were going to like do a kind of a general direction or for our audience, what are the like the two things that you think that they right now, based on where we are, this reality, what are the two things that you think a salon owner has to address right now?
That's a really great question. And uh, the answer that's coming to me, I had a theme that was really driving the roundtables and driving my conversation, and that was hope and action. We need hope and we need to take action. And I almost think we're past the hope. And I think it's just taking action. It's just doing things in that bit. So I still think financial literacy and financial practices in salons universally is quite low. So I think number one, it's a great opportunity to really level up financial practices, teach your managers how to read P&Ls, understand, the basics, because it is still quite weak. That's number one, is just in many cases, even the experts in the beauty industry may not know what they don't know. So just to be honest with yourself and say there's another level of financial practices and financial acumen. That's number one. Number two is the world of tax. And, tax is an area that I spent many, many years in my career. And it's just, for many, it's just one more thing. But the world of taxation today there's a lot of volatility, and the amount of dollars that go into tax are staggering. So, for example, again, back to transition planning, there's rumors that there will be a change in capital gain rates, and it'll be unfavorable change. So some people are accelerating certain decisions this year that might trigger a capital gain. So I think that level up your financial practices, intelligence, et cetera, and don't forget about tax, because tax is where tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars are involved. So.
Well, both of these things, yes, taxes and financial acumen. Uh, I would think that no wonder your business, your company is growing, and because those two things, I don't really think people can do. They can't do these alone. You can't do it alone. It's not something you can Google, you know, or
Yeah.
even ask your friend who's another salon owner. These two subjects that you brought up, these two necessaries, that you have to get people in your team, like a financial advisor or a tax advisor, to CPA, to get through these. And
So
go ahead.
yes, so many of us pay attention to our internal team, our
Hmm.
leader team, but to really be conscious about who your outside team is too. For
Yes.
example, you and your company and all of the Neo brands. I mean, they're part of the team. Whether it's technology, whether it's distribution, whether it's education, whether it's Elevate, whether you're serious business. I mean, these are all things that should round out what a business can't do on their own. So really think about who's your outside team and shuffle it up. I mean, I've seen some really crappy advisors that have just misled. I'm working with at least a half a dozen right now. So take advantage of the opportunity to take a fresh look at who your outside team is right now.
Well, the people listening and watching, they can see, you basically you put yourself out there. You're a perfect person for that. But I think, how can we reach more people to give them that information, that direction? Because I know you're absolutely correct that those two things, financial acumen and taxes, you've got to, no matter how much, I know there's so much, we talked about Clubhouse earlier. There's so many conversations about culture and, like you said, the internal team. And those are foundational. But I'm not hearing any conversation about taxes, and starting to hear a little bit more about financial acumen, even from the young hairdressers. But maybe, the financial acumen that you were talking about, you're going to start a group for the schools.
Yeah, and
maybe there's a curriculum for students,
Well, funny you say that, because that's probably that's been maybe one of the biggest changes we've made is, and I can't go entirely public on this, but I received a phone call last June inviting us to do a more robust course on money management for students. And Erin's my daughter, my business partner. You, of course, know her. She's a dynamo. We both looked at each other and said, it's about time, because we've been wanting to do this for years. So that was the reason to cause another company, because we really feel, I mean, if I'm really going to be about helping businesses, level up their financial, understanding, acumen, we got to start with the students. We got to start with the students, because the literacy, if it starts at a young age, we're losing too many hairdressers, and we're losing hairdressers because they haven't been properly taught the money part of the business. They get discouraged early on. They have false expectations. They maybe made some early bad decisions about where to work or where not to work. And so that's really given us a ton of juice. We have turned our studio into a filming studio. Every single weekend we're filming to complete our curriculum. And Money by Qnity, I guess this is the first time I'm actually saying this publicly, will be something that these students will love, because it's simple, it's visual, it uses animation, it gives.
Which, by the way, is another thing you are so good at. I just have to acknowledge you, because I was thinking about talking to you today, and I was thinking about, you really took, when that whole thing about the left brain, right brain became kind of a conversation, you really took that and became such a student of that. And so I have complete confidence that what you put together for the students will be visually compelling. And that, of course, I think is necessary. So
yeah, it's just we say use design to align. If we want to align, right-brained, creative, visual, and whether you use the word right brain or not, let's just use the word visual learners. 50% of Americans have a form of math anxiety, and probably the same amount has a form of money anxiety. All of us have money stories, and most of them are not good. Very few people learn about. I didn't teach my kids personal finance. I learned on my own. I just assumed my kids did, and what a failure, because we didn't have a course. They just don't teach courses like this in career colleges and high school. And so that is really probably what has me jazzed the most, is to be able to reach students next. And it's a ton of fun to really make concepts that appear very complicated and really make them more approachable for a 18, 19, 20, 25-year-old kid. Pardon the word kid, but I mean, a younger professional is just, so I really think using visual communication. I mean, the longest person that's been around at Qnity other than myself is our designer, Linda Henneman. She's the behind the scenes designer. She's my dyad, and she's dyad, my dynamic duo on the visual side. And she's an award-winning designer. The 9 Grid actually won a national graphic design award, which to many people it's like, so what? But for me, it's like, former accountant, to be able to say that makes me proud.
Yes. Well, Tom, I thank you so much. And the last thing I want to say to you and about you is that I have heard from so many people how much support you gave people during this last year and how difficult, this most difficult year in time, and how generous that you have been. So
Well,
you
thank
get
you.
what you put out. So you should be expecting a lot of good coming your way. So
So I learned about generosity from people such as you. So thank you, right back to you. So
yeah.
you're exceptionally generous to everybody. This is a big commitment for you to do these conversations. And I'm such a big fan of Neil. My career goes back to in the beauty industry, starts almost with Neil in distribution. So what an honor to be part of this group and to be with the
Well,
people behind the scenes too. So thank you.
thank you, Tom. Thank you so much.
Cheers with my serious business water bottle. All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.